want to know what attracts you to the work. Is it story? Is it character? Is it genre, setting? But from what I know of you, it seems like genre is the key somehow.
You know, I think genre is important to me, particularly when it comes to reinventing genre. You know, I think in general, I'm drawn to genre when I see something that needs to be refreshed, and I honestly attribute that a great deal to the movies that I grew up on, Woody Allen movies, Monty Python movies, the Zucker brother movies, which were really, weirdly inspiring to me.
Yes, Airplane.
And this is Spinal Tap, which really, you know, I've made now 2 improvisational movies. All of those movies, to me, were doing incredibly inspiring things. I mean, some of those I think are I think This is Spinal Tap is as good a movie as, you know, I'd put that in my top 20 of the last 50 years. Yes. And they're basically coming at, all of those are parodies of genres. I mean, even Spinal Tap is a parody of the rockumentary. And so just the idea, and even look at Last Action Hero, the idea was, how can we love these genres, how can we make fun of them at the same time? And by the way, I'm not sure that you can. One of the things I've learned the hard way is it's better to just either make fun of it or do it straight, one way or the other. But I would really say that I mean, not to sound like I'm giving the answer that's appropriate for the venue, but I will tell you, story to me is the most important thing. You know, I can't embark on a project until I know that there's a story that fulfills what I need a story to fulfill. I mean, if there's not a full story from beginning to end inherent in the idea that I'm thinking of, I don't care how much it interests me. I mean, it just, to me, screenwriting remains a craft about storytelling. You know, how do you tell a story in this very unusual venue? I mean, the length of a movie is fairly arbitrary, as we know. It's, you know, in fact, having just worked in TV, you know, 60 minutes feels like a more natural length to tell a story, or even 30 minutes than 90 minutes, which it very often you have to fill 20 minutes of your story to get from beginning to end. You know, it's that second act lull that all writers dread. So for me, I think story and genre are very important. I've certainly tried to get away from genre, you know, at times, just to try to break out of the confines of it. But I do think it's incredibly, let me restate this. I think that there's a lot of people in Hollywood who could learn a lot by just understanding the genres and how they work, like horror, for example. Because a lot of times you'll go in and talk to someone about their project, and, you know, even in studio, and they'll say, yeah, we really like this, we think it's a big action movie, and you'll say, this is a horror movie, what are you talking about? They'll say, no, it's an action movie. I'm like, what do you mean? Everyone's getting murdered, and there's an investigation, and people are scared all the time, and there's no action scenes. That's a horror movie. And they're like, well, what about the guy getting thrown off a bridge? I'm like, not an action scene. That's the horror scene. You know, you got to know the difference. Die Hard's an action movie. You know, so for the, you know, kind of initial analysis of a concept or a rewrite or anything else, having a strong understanding of genre, I think, yes, that's very important to me, and something I kind of can't help. I grew up in an era where genre, you know.
Well, as it continues to be the case. How would your reaction be if you had an idea for a story that was in a genre that you would never have, love story, for example? What would you do? Would you turn it into another genre?
No. If I had a good idea for a love story, and I've written a lot, obviously I've jumped around tremendously in terms of genre. Sometimes I think not always the best career move, but I've purposely tried to, I mean, I've written 2, you know, behind enemy lines, prison escape movies, you know, which it's not a genre that, I guess Papillon always appealed to me, but I just fell into them, and anytime I get the opportunity to write something that's in a different genre, I jump on it. I'm a really firm believer that you don't, that you know, it's what's the metaphor might be, it's the sculpture is in the rock and you have to chip away at the rock till you find the sculpture. A good idea for a love story should be a love story. You know, I do firmly believe that. It's hard for me to write love stories because the kind of love stories that I like are not the kind that get made. I mean, people always ask me what's my favorite romantic comedy, and you know, to me it would probably be like Annie Hall or something, which, as you know, to call that a romantic comedy in the strict genre sense is, you know, obviously it's not like a lot of other romantic comedies.
No, but it's a courtship comedy.
Right.
It's about,
absolutely,
you know, or dramedy.
right.
But Annie Hall is, underneath it all, is a self-inquisition. It's an education plot where Elvie Singer is asking himself the question, why is it I can't love?
Right.
It's really, you know, he's trying to understand himself, and by the end of the film, he has learned who he is, and he realizes he's incapable of love, and you know, and so that's not typical of a romantic comedy.
Right.
That the protagonist is doing this inquisition.
Right, and the structure and form of it are very different as well.
Yes, and breaking the fourth wall and all that.
Right.
But nonetheless, it's very moving.
Right. No, and the thing is that I'm trying to think if there's another. I actually think the Judd Apatow films, and you know the ones around them, made me think. You know, maybe I could write a romantic comedy now because some of those movies are romantic comedies, and they did appeal to me in a way that others don't. I don't like. I think what's hard for me is most romantic comedies in Hollywood are highly formulaic,
yes.
and kind of need to be highly formulaic to work, and that's really hard for me to write. Like I feel a tremendous urge to break away from the formula in an intelligent way, and anyway, but I'm off subject. The truth is,
you're on subject.
The story is, you come up with an idea, don't try to pigeonhole it, you know, crank it into something else. You know, you might end up with the best romantic comedy ever written.
This struggle between the inspiration, the source of inspiration, and the shape of story of the genre. I mean, this is a chicken and egg thing that goes on in every writer's life. I mean, does the source material lead you to ideas, or do you get an idea that sends you in search of source material?
Right. Yeah.
But those go back and those go back and forth.
Sure.
I mean, as you said, inspiration is something you can't control.
Right.
Ideas just come, and then they need to be filled out.
Right.
And so when in the effort to find that material to fill it out, you get re-inspired.
Right.
And that inspiration may take you in another way. It may take you to want to do some sort of satire,
right,
for example. And so, but you've thought through this. You know the way in which it seems to me that your imagination is influencing the material that you choose, and the material that you choose, and the genre that you choose is reshaping your imagination.
Unquestionably, and in fact, I would say that when I come up with an idea, you know, when an idea pops into my head, the first thing that I start thinking about is, what genre is this closest to? You know, what kind of story am I telling? I mean, sometimes the genre label can get confusing because people think of, you know, for example, people will say a Western, this is an argument I used to have with my then writing partner. A Western is a movie where people wear cowboy hats and ride on horses and shoot guns, and there's a shootout in an old West town. And that notion of genre is less helpful to me. I mean, that's helpful from a critic's point of view, but not helpful from a writer's point of view, because it doesn't tell you what shape the story is going to take. You know, if you say, I'm writing a movie about a woman who's struggling to raise 2 kids in the Old West, talking about what the conventions of the Western genre are is not as helpful as a number of other ways to look at the story. Whereas if someone says we want to do a Western, okay, then yes, that's an appropriate thing to go back and look at what happens in a Western. For me, the place where genre gets really exciting is where genre dictates structure, where genre dictates structure on an emotional level. Horror movies being a very good example, that if you're telling a story about a family unit that for some sort of pathological reason invites someone into their unit who tears them apart, that's where the horror genre of, we used a word for it, like Psycho in the House was our term for it, but that's not even, there's probably a more appropriate one. But that genre is incredibly rich in terms of there are certain beats that always occur in those stories, and not because people don't have good imaginations and can't come up with something. It's because you want to see those moments. Actually, a better example would be Jekyll and Hyde, which we wrote about a lot. Horror stories about a person fighting against himself. That's something I've revisited many times. Obviously, writing The Hulk is very much a Jekyll and Hyde story.
Yes.
Altered States is a great Jekyll and Hyde story. I always cite one of the best ones ever told. I think Cronenberg's remake of The Fly is a perfect Jekyll and Hyde movie, posing as a science fiction movie. And one of the things you realize when you analyze those movies is certain beats occur in every good version of that story and don't occur in the bad versions. Like, there is always a moment where Jekyll begs his best friend, his lover, whatever, to kill him, to stop Hyde by sacrificing himself. Mm-hmm. And that's not because that's what audiences expect. That's not because there's no rule book that says it has to be. It's that's the deepest place that story can go, and you gotta go there.
Yes.
And so if you start to understand that about genre, it can be incredibly helpful when you have an idea to say, okay, I know this is a Jekyll and Hyde story. Am I taking it where the genre, this genre has been explored? Is it helpful to me to help me turn this from an idea into a full story? The answer is usually yes. And then the real trick is what do you choose not to do, just because it's been done too many times. But